Shun Weiming died at 26 years old, slumped over a merchant company desk in a cramped office that smelled of ink and regret. 12 years. 12 years of 18-hour days, of calculating profits that flowed into pockets that were never his own, of watching lesser men claim credit for his work, while he withered behind stacks of ledgers. His heart simply stopped, surrendering to exhaustion that had accumulated like unpaid debts. His final thought was not of family, not of love, not of the future he would never see. It was bitter, crystalline regret. He had never built anything of his own. Then darkness, then nothing, then light. Weiming gasped awake in a bed so thin he could feel wooden slats pressing against his spine. His lungs burned, as if he had been drowning. His hands flew to his chest, expecting the weight of a dead man's body, and found instead the narrow frame of a boy. A boy. He stared at his fingers. Small, uncalloused, young. The room around him was cramped and dim, walls of packed earth interrupted by a single window that let in harsh afternoon light. Dust motes drifted like snow. Somewhere beyond the walls, he heard voices raised in argument and the unmistakable slur of a drunk man pretending to be sober. Memory crashed into him like a flood breaking through a dam. Yinmen Village, the hushy corridor, his father's trade post at the edge of nowhere. He was 14 years old, and his father was dead. The door burst open, and a man stumbled through, reeking of cheap rice wine. Shun Buichin, his uncle, the appointed headman of this dying settlement. The man's robes hung open, stained and wrinkled. His eyes, bleary and unfocused, barely registered Weiming's presence. "You're awake," Buichin grunted. "Good. Creditors are coming tomorrow. Your father owed the Liangzhou merchants 40 silver taels. Figure out how to pay them, or they'll take the house. No comfort, no condolence, just the cold arithmetic of survival." Weiming said nothing. He watched his uncle sway toward the door, muttering about funeral arrangements and wine stores, and felt nothing but the strange clarity of a man who had already died once. Then the notification appeared. Translucent blue characters materialized in his vision, floating like a scholar's calligraphy written on air itself. Population dividend system activated. Current residents, 47 daily income, 47 gold coins, 1 gold coin per resident per day. System goal, reach 100,000 residents within 3 years. First payment at midnight. Weiming's breath caught. This was real. The weight of knowledge settled into his bones with absolute certainty. Not a dream, not delirium. Something had chosen him, had pulled him from death and dropped him into this forgotten village with a path forward so clear it burned. 1 gold coin per resident per day. He knew the value of gold. In his previous life, he had spent 12 years calculating commodity prices, tracking exchange rates, watching fortunes made and lost. A single gold coin in this era was worth more than a common laborer earned in an entire year. Merchants killed for less. Nobles hoarded them like dragons guarding treasure. And the system was offering him 47 of them. Every single day, the scale of it staggered him. But so did the goal. 100,000 residents. 3 years. That meant adding roughly 91 people per day, every day, for 1,095 days straight. Traditional growth was impossible. Villages like Yinmen gained perhaps 2 or 3 residents per year through births and marriages. At that rate, he would need centuries. He needed something else entirely. The afternoon passed in a haze. As Weiming explored the village he barely remembered from childhood visits. Yinmen had perhaps 30 buildings, half of them abandoned. The defensive wall that once protected traders from bandit raids had crumbled in 3 places. The market square, which should have bustled with merchants haggling over silk and spices, stood empty except for a single elderly woman selling dried dates no one could afford to buy. The well worked. That was the only good news. Grandmother Chu found him standing at the village's edge, staring west toward the mountains where the trade road vanished into bandit territory. She was ancient, her back bent from decades of labor, but her eyes remained sharp. "Your father was a good man," she said, pressing a bowl of thin congee into his hands. "He tried to save this place. The route shifted north 3 years ago, and the young ones followed the coin. Now, we're just waiting to die. Wei Ming drank the kanji. It was more water than rice. How many people live here now? 47. She smiled sadly. I keep count. Someone should remember our names when the village finally dies. 47. The system's count was exact. That night, Wei Ming sat alone in his father's empty house, surrounded by ledgers filled with red ink and unpaid debts. The creditors wanted 40 silver taels. His father's remaining inventory might fetch 10. The math was simple. Bankruptcy, eviction, death by slow starvation on a road that led nowhere. Unless he waited. The hours crawled past like wounded animals. He did not sleep. He did not move. He simply watched the darkness beyond his window and counted his own heartbeats. At midnight, the air itself seemed to hum. 47 gold coins materialized on the desk before him. They appeared from nothing, stacking themselves in a neat pile that gleamed like captured sunlight. Each one was the size of a plum, heavy with the weight of possibility. Wei Ming picked up a coin. Cold metal, real metal, worth more than everything his father had owned combined. He counted them 3 times, then 4. His hands trembled, and he did not know if it was fear or hope or something else entirely. A new line appeared in his vision. Resident satisfaction, low. Cause, economic stagnation, no opportunities for youth. The system was watching. It wasn't enough to simply gather people like livestock. They had to want to stay. They had to thrive. Wei Ming opened his father's ledger to a blank page. His brush trembled as he ground fresh ink, but when he pressed it to paper, his strokes were steady. Day 1. Population, 47. Daily income, 47 gold. Target, 100,000 residents within 3 years. His eyes burned. Tears gathered at the edges, remnants of a boy's grief for a father he would never see again. He refused to let them fall. This time would be different. This time, he would build something that belonged to him. The rooster crowed before dawn. But Wei Ming had not slept. He sat cross-legged on the packed earth floor of his father's study, surrounded by scrolls and documents that smelled of dust and forgotten ambition. His brush had not stopped moving for hours. The ledger before him was no longer blank, page after page filled with his cramped, precise characters. Numbers, distances, names, resources. Yinmin Village. Population, 47 souls. 3 functioning wells, though the eastern one ran brackish in summer. 2 grain storage warehouses, one with a leaking roof. A third warehouse, larger, that his father had built for trade goods that never came. 12 residential compounds, most housing 2 or 3 families each. 1 smithy, cold for 6 months since old Dang's hands grew too arthritic to work the bellows. 1 textile workshop where 3 widows wove rough hemp cloth that no merchant would buy. And the headman's seal. Wei Ming's brush paused over those 3 words. The seal was everything. Without it, he could not sign contracts, could not register new residents, could not purchase property or goods in the village's name, could not do anything that mattered. The seal belonged to his uncle. He set down his brush and walked outside into the gray pre-dawn light. Yinmin stretched before him, a sad scatter of mud brick buildings clustered around a central well, surrounded by terraced fields that had once grown wheat and millet, but now lay half fallow. Beyond the village, the hushy corridor opened like a wound between mountains, a narrow strip of habitable land that connected east and west. Liangzhou lay 2 days' travel east. 3,000 people, a proper market, a merchant guild office, the nearest place to buy grain in bulk, hire laborers, or acquire other things. The Western Mountain Pass sat half a day distant. Beyond it, the trade routes continued toward the Sassanid remnant, towards cities whose names Wei Ming had only read in his father's journals. Merv, Samarkand, Ctesiphon. But the pass was controlled by the Iron Wolf bandits. 300 men who taxed every caravan that tried to cross. His father had paid their toll for years, maintaining a fragile peace that let Yinmin survive on the scraps of commerce. Wei Ming memorized the distances, the routes, the choke points. He calculated travel times, labor costs, how many workers he would need to repair the warehouses, how much grain to sustain a population of 100, 500, 1,000, 100,000. 3 years. The numbers were impossible. He knew they were impossible. A village could not grow from 47 to 100,000 in 3 years. Cities took generations to reach such populations. Empires rose and fell in less time. But the system did not care about what was possible. The system only counted. He found his uncle exactly where he expected, in a headman's residence, slumped over a low table with a half-empty jar of rice wine clutched in one hand. Shin Buqin had been a merchant once. A good one, according to Wei Ming's father's letters. The two brothers had worked together in their youth, building the trade contacts and relationships that should have made Yinmen prosperous. Then something had broken in Buqin, a failed venture, a woman who left, a dream that curdled into bitterness. By the time Wei Ming's father inherited the headman position from their own father, Buqin had already retreated into the bottle. Now he was headman himself, and the bottle had retreated into him. Uncle! Buqin's eyes opened slowly. They were bloodshot, yellowed at the edges, but not entirely stupid. That was the dangerous thing about drunks. People assumed the wine killed their minds. Sometimes it just drowned their ambitions, while leaving their cunning intact. Boy! Buqin's voice rasped like gravel. Shouldn't you be weeping somewhere? Your father's only been dead 3 days. Wei Ming did not flinch. He had spent 14 years learning not to flinch. I need the headman's seal. Buqin laughed, a wet, ugly sound. Do you now? And what would a child do with the seal? Sign your own marriage contract? Authorize your own bedtime? Sign trade agreements? Purchase contracts? Residence registrations? The laughter stopped. Buqin's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Wei Ming glimpsed the man his uncle might have been. Sharp, calculating, dangerous. Your father tried to save this village for 20 years, Buqin said slowly. He had contacts in Liangzhou, friends in the Imperial Trade Ministry, a reputation built on decades of honest dealing. And still Yinmen rotted around him like fruit left too long in the sun. He took a long drink from the wine jar. What makes you think you can do better? Because I have something he didn't. Oh, and what's that? Youth? Arrogance? A complete ignorance of how the world actually works. Wei Ming reached into his robe and produced a single gold coin. The effect was immediate. Buqin's hand froze halfway to his mouth. The wine jar trembled, his eyes fixed on the coin with the intensity of a starving man seeing bread. Gold. Real gold. Not silver taels, not copper cash, not the iron script that peasants use for daily transactions. A gold coin worth more than most families in Yinmen would see in their entire lives. Where? Buqin whispered, Did you get that? That's not your concern. Wei Ming set the coin on the table between them. This is, I will handle all village administration, all commerce, all negotiations with merchants, officials, and anyone else who matters. You will stamp the documents I prepare and attend official functions sober. In exchange, you will receive a monthly allowance sufficient to keep you in rice wine until you drown in it. Buqin stared at the coin, at the boy, at the coin again. You're serious. I'm always serious, uncle. The silence stretched. Wei Ming watched emotions war across his uncle's face. Pride and greed and suspicion and something that might have been hope, quickly smothered. You're an arrogant child, Buqin said finally. You'll fail. Whatever scheme you're running, whatever wealthy fool you've convinced to back you, it will collapse within a month, and then you'll come crawling back to me begging forgiveness. Perhaps. You don't even deny it. I'm offering you a deal, uncle, not a debate. Wei Ming's voice hardened. Take it or don't. But if you refuse, I'll find another way to get what I need. And you'll have nothing. Buqin's jaw tightened. For a moment, Wei Ming thought he would refuse out of pure spite. Then his uncle grabbed the gold coin with trembling fingers and bit down on it. Real gold. His eyes widened. Fine, he spat. Do whatever you want. Play at being headman. But don't expect me to clean up your mess when it all falls apart. I expect nothing from you, uncle. That's the point. The caravan arrived at midday. 12 camels and 8 ox carts carrying grain from the eastern provinces. A routine resupply run heading west toward Dunhuang, stopping at every settlement along the way to sell their surplus. Wei Ming intercepted them at the village gate. The lead merchant was a heavy-set man named Zheng, with a wispy beard and the calculating eyes of someone who had spent 30 years squeezing profit from desperate farmers. He looked at Wei Ming and saw what everyone saw: a boy, a child playing at adult business. "I want to buy grain," Wei Ming said. Zheng smiled indulgently. "Of course you do, young master. How much?" "One sure. 2. We have excellent millet, very fair price for a village in your circumstances. 50 sure. Delivered to our eastern warehouse by sunset." The smile froze. 50 sure was enough grain to feed Yanmen for 2 months. It was a bulk order, the kind of purchase that only established merchants made, not boys in dirt-stained robes standing at village gates. 50 sure, Zheng repeated carefully. "That would be considerably expensive." "I know. What's your price?" 12 gold coins. Wei Ming almost laughed. The price was absurd, triple what the grain was actually worth. Zheng was testing him, seeing if he was naive enough to accept. In his first life, Wei Ming had negotiated contracts worth millions. He had faced boardrooms full of executives whose fortunes dwarfed this merchant's entire clan. He had learned to read desperation, to smell blood in the water, to know exactly when a seller was bluffing. Zheng was bluffing. "For gold coins," Wei Ming said, "and I'll place a standing order for the same quantity every month, guaranteed payment on delivery." Zheng's eyebrows rose. "Young master, you cannot. The grain is lower quality than you're claiming. I can see the moisture damage on the southern carts covering from here. Your storage was inadequate during the spring rains. You're heading west to Dunhuang, which means you'll need to cross the mountain pass, which means you'll need to pay the Iron Wolf toll, which means you're already calculating losses on this run." Wei Ming stepped closer. "You want to dump inventory before the pass? I'm offering you a guaranteed buyer with ready coin. Take the deal or don't." The silence lasted 10 heartbeats. 6 gold coins, Zheng said quietly. "Final offer." "Done." Word spread through the village by nightfall. The Shen boy had purchased more grain than Yanmen had seen in 3 years. He had done it with gold. Actual gold. More money than most villagers earned in a decade. He had haggled with a Liangzhou merchant and won. Wei Ming heard the whispers as he supervised the unloading, the confused murmurs, the questions about where the money came from. The wonder and the suspicion tangled together like threads in a knot. Grandmother Chu appeared at his elbow, her ancient face unreadable. "You haggle exactly like your father did," she said. "The same way of watching, waiting, striking when they're off balance." Wei Ming's hand stilled on the ledger. His father's ledger. His father's handwriting still visible on the older pages, recording trades that had happened before Wei Ming was born. "I learned from watching him," he said, and it was not entirely a lie. Chu studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once and walked away without another word. That night, alone in his father's study, Wei Ming opened the ledger to a fresh page and recorded his first transaction. 50 sure of grain, 6 gold coins spent. Village food supply secured for 2 months. Then he received his second payment from the system. 47 gold coins materialized in the locked chest he had prepared, appearing from nothing, real and solid and impossible. He was recording the transaction when new text appeared in his vision. Resident satisfaction, low. Cause, economic stagnation, no opportunities for youth. Wei Ming stared at the words. The system was not just counting residents. It was measuring their happiness, their hope, their reasons to stay. And right now, his 47 people had none. His brush hovered over the page. Grain was not enough. Gold was not enough. He needed to give them something to believe in. He needed to give them a future worth staying for. The road east stretched empty beneath a pale morning sky, dust devils swirling in the windless air like spirits too tired to haunt properly. Wei Ming walked its edge alone, his sandals crunching against packed earth that countless merchants had traveled for centuries. 3 days since the system had changed everything. 3 days of planning, calculating, and watching that number burn in his mind. 47 residents, 47 gold coins per day, and a deadline that gave him no room for patience. He had risen before dawn, slipping past his uncle's snoring form to walk the trade road. Not for exercise, not for fresh air, for reconnaissance. A peddler passed him heading east, a weathered man with a pack of leather goods strapped to his back. Wei Ming raised a hand in greeting. "Friend, rest in Yinmen? We have fresh water, shade." The peddler barely glanced at him. Nothing to sell there. Nothing to buy. He kept walking, his pace never slowing. Wei Ming watched him go, without expression. This was the third trader to dismiss him since sunrise. Yinmen was invisible to the Silk Road's flow of commerce, a settlement too small to matter, too poor to interest anyone carrying goods worth selling. He needed to change that, but not through conventional means. His brushstrokes from last night still haunted him. The calculations he had scrawled by candlelight, numbers that would horrify any traditional merchant. To reach 100,000 residents in 3 years, he needed to add roughly 91 people per day, every single day, for over 1,000 days straight. Impossible through natural growth. Impossible through reputation alone. Impossible through any method that relied on people choosing to come to Yinmen of their own accord. But not impossible if he made them come. The sun climbed toward noon, and Wei Ming was about to turn back when he spotted movement on the western horizon. A figure, small with distance, moving slowly. Too slowly. Limping. He waited. The figure resolved into an old man leading a single donkey. Persian robes, faded to the color of forgotten sand, hung loose on a frame that had once been substantial. The donkey looked worse, ribs showing, head drooping, loaded with bundles that had the desperate randomness of salvage possessions rather than trade goods. Wei Ming stepped into the road. The old man stopped, his hand moving to his belt where no weapon hung. Instinct. The Silk Road taught its travelers that kindness from strangers preceded violence. "Water," Wei Ming said. He held up a water skin. "And food, if you'll take it. Yinmen is a quarter-hour's walk. You look like you need rest more than road." Suspicion carved deep lines in the old man's face. "What do you want?" "Conversation. Maybe advice." Wei Ming smiled. It was not a warm smile. "You're a merchant. Or you were. I can tell by your hands. The calluses are from counting coins, not swinging tools. By your posture, you've spent decades judging people across bargaining tables. And by your donkey's loading. Those aren't trade goods, they're personal effects. Whatever you were carrying of value is gone." The old man stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a dry sound like sand scraping stone. "You have sharp eyes for a village boy." "I have hungry eyes," Wei Ming corrected. "Gulme, eat my grain. Tell me what happened to you. And maybe we can help each other." The meal was simple, boiled millet with preserved vegetables. But Farrak of Merv ate like a man who had forgotten the taste of anything except desperation. Wei Ming sat across from him in the shade of Yinmen's single inn, watching, waiting, letting silence do its work. Finally, Farrak spoke. "Iron Wolf bandits." The words came out flat, dead. 3 weeks ago, on the Western Pass. 40 camels, 12 guards, 30 years of built relationships with suppliers from Samarkand to Chang'an. He set down his bowl. "All gone in one night. They killed everyone except me. Left me alive to spread fear. To tell others what happens to caravans that don't pay their tribute. Your fortune, silk, spices, glass from Damascus." Farrak's voice cracked. "Enough to retire on. Enough to buy my grandson a future. Gone." Wei Ming leaned forward. "But not your knowledge." Farrak blinked. 50 years on the Silk Road, Wei Ming continued. "You know which routes are safe and which are death. You know which nobles in Dunhuang pay premium for azure-dyed silk, and which merchants in Liangzhou cheat on weights. You know the price of every good in every season." He paused. "And you know where to find people for sale. Labor markets, debt markets, the places where desperate men sell themselves or their families to survive." The old merchant's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something sharper. "You're 14 years old. I'm a boy with gold and no time." Wei Ming reached into his robe and produced a single coin, letting it catch the light. "Pure gold, worth more than most families earned in a lifetime." Farrak's breath caught. "I'm going to build something here," Wei Ming said. "Something that requires people. Many people. First, I need someone who knows how to acquire labor efficiently, where to find workers, what to pay, how to transport them. I need someone who can tell me the difference between a skilled carpenter selling himself for debt and a criminal being offloaded by someone who wants him dead. You're talking about buying people. I'm talking about finding them. Why do with them? After is my business. Wei Ming set the gold coin on the table between them. Room. Board. 10% of any deal your advice facilitates. And the chance to rebuild, rather than die on a road that's already taken everything from you. Farrick stared at the coin. At the boy. At the coin again. You have eyes like a predator counting gold, he said quietly. Wei Ming smiled. Is that a yes? That night, Wei Ming sat alone in his room, watching moonlight paint silver patterns on the floor. Farrick was asleep in the room next door, the first real bed the old merchant had seen in 3 weeks. One more resident. One more mind. One more step toward the impossible number. The system notification pulsed in his vision at midnight, exactly as it had before. Current residence, 48. Daily income, 48 gold coins. One person, 1 gold coin per day. Every day. Forever. Wei Ming stared at the number, and something clicked into place. A truth so obvious he had almost missed it. The system was not a shortcut to wealth. It was a machine for compound growth. Every person he added increased his income permanently. Every gold coin that income generated could be spent to add more people. And every person those gold coins brought would generate still more coins. Farrick, with his 50 years of knowledge, was worth far more than the single gold coin he contributed. He was a multiplier, a key that could unlock doors Wei Ming did not even know existed yet. The deadline was 3 years. 100,000 residents. 91 people per day. Wei Ming picked up his brush and began to write. The tea had grown cold 3 times before Wei Ming stopped asking questions. Farrick sat across from him in the cramped storage room that had become their war council, his weathered hands wrapped around a ceramic cup he had long forgotten to drink from. Maps covered the table between them, trade routes scratched onto yellowed paper, distances marked in days of travel, danger zones circled in faded red ink. Wei Ming had purchased these maps yesterday for 12 silver taels, and already they had paid for themselves 100-fold in knowledge. The western route is dead, Farrick said, tracing a finger along the mountain pass that connected Yinmin to the Sassanid territories. Has been for 3 years now. The Iron Wolf bandits took Qingshi Pass the winter your father died. 30% toll on all goods. 30%. He spat the number like a curse. No small merchant survives that margin. The large caravans take the northern route through Liangzhou instead. Safer, longer, but profitable. And Yinmin sits on the dead route. Yinmin sits on a corpse. Farrick shrugged with the casual fatalism of a man who had watched empires crumble. The village was never meant to thrive. It was meant to service travelers. No travelers, no service. Your father understood this. He tried to negotiate with the Iron Wolves, tried to establish a reduced toll for Yinmin merchants specifically. What happened? He died before the negotiations concluded. Your uncle inherited the headman's seal and immediately drank himself into a stupor. The Iron Wolves took his silence as rejection. Now, they charge Yinmin merchants 40% instead of 30%. A punishment tariff. Wei Ming filed this information away, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The Iron Wolf bandits were not merely obstacles. They were a pressure point, a lever that could be pulled, eventually, when he had enough weight behind him to pull it. But that was a problem for later. Right now, he needed bodies. Warm, breathing, countable bodies. The spring caravan season, Wei Ming said. 3 months away. What happens if Yinmin has something to offer by? Then, Farrick's eyebrows rose. Such as labor, services, a reason to stop. You would need infrastructure, lodging, warehouses, repair facilities for wagons and horses, food stores sufficient to feed hundreds of travelers at once. Farrick counted off on his fingers. You would need craftsmen, carpenters, blacksmiths, weavers, tanners. You would need people. Yes. Farrick paused, studying the boy across from him with renewed interest. Many people. Where exactly do you intend to find them? Wei Ming met his gaze without flinching. Tell me about Ming Zhou. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Faraka's expression shifted. Not shock, not disgust, but something more complicated. Recognition, perhaps, or resignation. 2 days south, he said finally. The labor markets open at dawn. Prices range from 30 to 100 silver taels, depending on age, health, and skills. Younger workers command higher prices. Craftsmen can reach 200 taels if their skills are verified. What types are available? Debt prisoners, failed merchants who sold themselves to cover losses, war captives from the Khaganate border skirmishes, orphans indentured by villages that could not feed them. Faraka's voice remained steady, clinical. The Mingzhou market is smaller than Beijing's, but closer. Beijing lies 5 days north. Larger selection, better quality, some would say, but the prices reflect that. Wei Ming had already begun calculating. 48 gold coins per day. 1 gold coin equaled 100 silver taels. At an average cost of 50 silver taels per person, he could acquire approximately 100 people per day if he spent his entire income. But he could not spend his entire income. Infrastructure costs, housing, food supplies, wages for existing villagers. Call it 30% for overhead. 70 people per day, sustainable. 70 people became 70 additional gold coins of daily income. Within a month, his budget would double. Within 2 months, triple. Compound growth. I need to acquire 3,000 laborers over the next 3 months, Wei Ming said, and the number hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Faraka inhaled sharply. 3,000. Minimum. Preferably more. I will offer contracts. 5 to 7 years of work in exchange for freedom papers upon completion. Housing provided. Wages paid. Those who stay beyond their contract term will receive land allotments. I am describing a choice. Wei Ming leaned forward, his voice hardening. Every person I acquire will be given a choice they did not have before. Work for me, live here, build something. Or take their freedom papers immediately and walk away. No chance, no branding, no overseers with whips. He paused. Do you understand the difference? Faraka was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly he nodded. I understand that you are either the most ruthless merchant I have ever met, he said, or the most naive. I have not yet determined which. Determine it later. For now, tell me which market we visit first. The planning consumed the rest of the morning and most of the afternoon. Logistics, transport, housing requirements, food stores. Faraka's knowledge proved invaluable. He knew which Mingzhou traders were reliable, which dealt in damaged goods, which could be trusted to deliver healthy workers rather than half-dead prisoners dressed in clean clothing. When evening came, Wei Ming felt something shift in his awareness. A warmth spreading through his chest. A notification. Daily income distributed 48 gold coins. The familiar weight of wealth settling into his soul. But this time something else followed. Resident satisfaction, low moderate. Cause, employment opportunities created. Effect, income multiplier 1.1x active. Wei Ming stared at the words. Employment opportunities. The villagers he had hired to begin housing expansion. The premium wages he had paid. The work orders given to old man Zhou the carpenter, to the 3 young men who had been idle since the trade routes died, to grandmother Chu herself for organizing provisions. Tomorrow's payment would not be 48 gold. It would be 53. The system rewarded him for making his people's lives better. Not just for counting heads, for creating genuine improvement, for building something that mattered. For the first time since his reincarnation, Wei Ming allowed himself to smile. 7 days. In 7 days, Shun Wei Ming had accumulated 371 gold coins. He laid them out on his father's desk in stacks of 10, the lamplight catching their edges until the room seemed to glow with concentrated wealth. Each coin represented more money than most families in the Hushi corridor would see in 3 generations. And tomorrow, 55 more would appear in his storage space. The day after, 55 more. The mathematics of miracles. But mathematics alone would not build an empire in 3 years. Farrick stood across the desk, his weathered face unreadable, as Wei Ming pushed 250 coins toward him. Mingzhou, Wei Ming said. The southern markets. You know the routes. I know them. Farrick did not touch the gold. I know what waits in those markets, too. 3,000 able-bodied laborers. Young, healthy, mixed skills were possible. Farmers, craftspeople, anyone who can work. Wei Ming slid a folded document across the desk. These are the contracts. 5 to 7 years of service, depending on purchase price. Modest daily wages during service. Clear paths to full freedom and land ownership. After completion, Farrick unfolded the paper, his eyes moving slowly across the precise characters. You drafted these yourself. I did. The terms are harsh. The terms are survivable. Better than what they have now. The Persian trader was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, a soft, bitter sound that held no humor. When I was young, I told myself I would never deal in human cargo. I watched men haggle over children like they were goats. I swore I was better than that. You are better than that. Wei Ming met his eyes steadily. I am not buying slaves to keep them enslaved. I am buying their contracts to give them something that does not exist in those markets. A future, land, dignity, a chance. And you need them for your quota. The words hung in the air. Wei Ming did not flinch from them. Yes, he said, I need them for my quota. I need 3,000 people in Yinmen within a month and 3,000 more than a month. After that, and more. After that, until I have 100,000 residents in a village that currently holds 50 souls. The system does not care about my intentions, only my numbers. But I care about my intentions. And my intention is to build something worth living in, not a prison with comfortable beds. Farrick folded the contracts and tucked them into his robe. Then, slowly, he gathered the gold coins into the leather satchel at his hip. 3 weeks, he said. I will be back in 3 weeks with as many as the markets will give me. Pray they survive the journey. He limped toward the door, then paused without turning. Your father would not recognize what you have become, Shun Wei Ming. Good. The door closed. Wei Ming sat in the empty room and listened to the hoofbeats fade into the night. The next morning brought unexpected profit. Wei Ming was overseeing the warehouse expansion when a girl appeared at the construction site. 16 years old, slight of build, with ink-stained fingers and her grandmother's sharp eyes. Chu Huifan, she announced, bowing crisply. My grandmother says you need someone who can read and count. I could do both. I want to work. Wei Ming studied her. Most girls her age in Yinmen were already betrothed, their futures mapped in cooking fires and children. But Huifan stood with her chin lifted and her hands steady, and there was hunger in her face that he recognized. Show me. She produced a small ledger from her sleeve. Her own records, he realized. Accounts of every household in Yinmen. Who owed what to whom. Which families had grain reserves, which were struggling. The penmanship was elegant, the calculations flawless. Where did you learn this? My father was a merchant's clerk before he died. He taught me before the fever took him. Grandmother kept me hidden from the marriage brokers because she knew I was worth more than a bride price. Wei Ming smiled. 1 gold coin per day. You will track every resident, every transaction, every resource that enters or leaves this village. Can you do that? Huifan's eyes went wide. 1 gold coin daily was more than her family had earned a year. Ah, yes. Yes, I can do that. Good. Start now. I want a complete census of current residents by sundown. She bowed again and ran toward the village center, her worn sandals kicking up dust. 51 residents now. The system hummed in recognition. Money changed everything. Wei Ming paid triple wages for every worker he could find. Men who had spent years idle suddenly had purpose, digging foundations, hauling timber, mixing mortar. Women organized supply lines, prepared meals for the work crews, managed the growing grain stockpile. Even children ran messages between sites, earning copper coins that made them feel important. The warehouse frame rose in 5 days. Housing foundations multiplied across the eastern field. Wei Ming purchased materials in bulk from Liangzhou merchants. haggling with the cold efficiency of someone who knew exactly what each plank and nail should cost. Word spread. Yinmen, the dying village in the hushy corridor, suddenly alive with construction, suddenly flowing with coin. Something strange is happening out there. Wei Ming overheard a Liangzhou carter say to his companion, as they unloaded timber. That village boy, he spent 40 gold coins on lumber like it was nothing. 40 gold. My grandfather never saw 10 gold in his whole life. Where's it coming from? Nobody knows. But I'm not complaining. Wei Ming smiled and said nothing. Let them wonder. Let them spread rumors. Every whisper of wealth was an advertisement, and every advertisement attracted opportunity. By the end of the week, Yemen's population had grown to 50, two refugees from a failed settlement to the north who had heard there was work. Wei Ming welcomed them, housed them, employed them. 52. 53. The grain stockpile grew visibly in the new storage building. The smell of fresh cut would fill the air. For the first time in years, Yinmen felt like a place where things were being built rather than slowly dying. Hope spread through the village like warmth returning to frozen limbs. Then the dust cloud appeared on the eastern road. 12 riders. Wei Ming's stomach dropped the moment he saw them. Mounted warriors in leather armor, moving with the easy confidence of predators who had never met prey they could not kill. They stopped at the village boundary, their horses stamping and snorting, and the construction crews froze in place. Their leader was young, female. A warrior's braid hung down her back, threaded with small bones that clinked softly in the wind. Her face was sharp and angular, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. She surveyed Yin Men with eyes that calculated value and vulnerability in the same glance. This was Temujin. Wei Ming had heard the name whispered in fearful tones, a Khaganate raider who had carved out territory in the southern steppes. Young and ambitious and absolutely ruthless. Her band numbered perhaps 300, enough to burn any unprotected village to ash. Headman, she called out, her Zhonghua accented, but fluent. Show yourself. Boqin stumbled forward, reeking of morning wine and terror. He bowed low, too low, Wei Ming noted. The bow of a man who had already surrendered. Great warrior, Boqin stammered. We are honored by your... Spare me. Temujin's lip curled. I'm not here for flattery. I am here for tribute. 2 gold coins monthly, and my riders will not visit more frequently to encourage generosity. This is a generous offer. You should accept it. 2 gold coins. Nothing compared to Wei Ming's income. But he saw the calculation beneath the demand. Temujin was testing them. If they paid easily, she would raise the price. If they resisted, she would burn them out to make an example. Neither option led anywhere good. Boqin was already reaching for his seal pouch, ready to capitulate. Wei Ming stepped forward. A moment, he said. Every eye turned to him. Temujin's gaze sharpened with interest. A 14-year-old boy interrupting negotiations between warriors and headmen. Who is this? I am Shun Wei Ming, the one responsible for the construction you see. A child playing merchant. A merchant who thinks in percentages. Wei Ming kept his voice steady, his hands loose at his sides. Your offer is generous, but it is also short-sighted. 2 gold coins buys you tribute. I can offer you something worth far more. Temujin leaned forward in her saddle. Speak quickly. My patience is limited. 3 gold coins monthly. Murmurs from the construction workers. Even Boqin looked confused. Why offer more than demanded? In exchange, Wei Ming continued, Yinmen becomes your secure supply depot. Grain, horses, equipment, whatever your band requires for the southern campaigns. We will stockpile it, maintain it, and provide it at fair prices. No other village in the Hushy corridor offers such strategic value. No other village could afford to. Temujin was silent for a long moment. Her riders exchanged glances. You are either very brave, she said finally, or very stupid. I am very practical. You need reliable supply lines. I need protection from rival interests. This arrangement benefits us both. And if I simply take what I want, Wei Ming smiled. Only a leader thinks about what comes. After, the silence stretched. Then Temujin laughed, a sharp, surprise sound that seemed to startle even her own riders. 1 month, she said. I will give you 1 month to prove your usefulness. If the supplies are, as promised, we continue. If not, she drew a finger across her throat. I will enjoy watching you burn, little merchant. She wheeled her horse and rode east without another word. Her warriors followed, dust swirling in their wake. Wei Ming stood perfectly still until the hoofbeats faded. Then his legs gave out. He sat down hard on a pile of lumber, his heart pounding so violently he thought it might crack his ribs. 36 gold coins yearly for protection. A necessary expense. A survivable expense. But he had just made a promise he did not know how to keep. That night, Wei Ming returned to his father's house and opened his ledger. 1 month. He had 1 month to either pay tribute that would cripple his growth or find something to offer a Khaganate raider that was worth more than gold. Grain and supplies were a start. But Temujin had not become feared by accepting table scraps. She wanted power, influence, territory. What could a village of 50 offer a woman who commanded 300 warriors? The system notification glowed in the darkness. Current residence, 50. Daily income, 55 gold coins. Satisfaction bonus active. Warning, external threat detected. Population loss risk, high. The system did not solve problems. It just showed him mistakes. Everything he was building could be burned in 30 days. Wei Ming turned to a fresh page and wrote, what does Temujin actually want? The answer to that question would determine whether Yanmen survived. He stared at the blank space beneath the question, willing insight to come. Temujin wanted power, but power came in many forms. Military strength, political legitimacy, wealth, information. What did a Khaganate raider lack that a trading village could provide? The brush hovered over the paper. And then, slowly, Wei Ming began to write. 3 hours later, Huifan burst through the door without knocking. Master Shun, she gasped, her face pale with terror. Riders from the west. They carry the banner of the Iron Wolf. Wei Ming's blood turned to ice. The Iron Wolf bandits controlled the western mountain pass, 300 strong, brutal, and territorial. If they had heard about his wealth, heard about his deal with Temujin. How many? 40, maybe 50. Huifan's voice cracked. They are not stopping at the boundary. They are riding straight for the village center. Wei Ming rose from his desk. He had prepared for Temujin. He had not prepared for this. 50 villagers. No wolves. No weapons. And somewhere on the southern road, Farrick traveled with 250 gold coins. Enough wealth to spark a war. The system notification updated, cold and merciless. Warning, second external threat detected. Iron Wolf bandit contingent approaching. Estimated arrival, 7 minutes. Recommended action, evacuate. But there was nowhere to evacuate to. Wei Ming stepped into the night and watched the torchlight spreading across the western hills. A river of fire flowing toward everything he had built. And leading that river, mounted on a horse black, as pitch, rode a figure in wolf skull armor whose name was whispered with the same terror. As plague and famine, Iron Wolf Haigu had come to collect.